At the very heart of economics are supply and demand curves. We're going to start off with demand curves, and we're not going to go into an awful lot of detail, but I want you to get it intuitively before you go into the book. So here we go. Demand curves try to relate and explain the relationship between price on the y-axis and quantity, the number of items demanded, on the x-axis. For instance, we know if something is very high priced, people don't want to buy as many. As the price goes down, people want to buy more. Thus, we have the perfect example of a demand curve. Here we have for a given price, we can predict how much we will be able to sell. And for a lower price, we will sell more. Of course, we may not get as much revenue because depending on how elastic the demand is. But we'll talk about elasticity in a little bit. People speak of shifting demand curves. For instance, in this case, we shift from D1 to D2. That is an outward shift of the demand curve. What things can shift demand curves? Well, one thing is advertising. People don't know about a product, then they do, there's a greater demand for the product. Maybe there's a study that comes out and finds that whatever your product is good for you. That would be a shifter in the demand. That would shift the demand curve. Other things that can shift demand curves would be lack of competition or a substitute good where all of a sudden a substitute good comes in. Let's, for example, coal and oil. We have coal being a substitute for oil or natural gas. Natural gas in recent years have dropped in price, so people have shifted and there is less demand for coal than there used to be. So many things, substitutes, competition, and just what the demand for the product is based off of the perceived attributes of the product will shift demand. The second thing that people talk about regularly when it comes to demand curves is change in quantity demanded. That is, for a given demand curve, in this case D1, things that shift it up or down this axis, so up and down the actual demand. The thing that changes that is price. So for instance, if the price is high, you sell a few items. If the price is low, you sell more. So quantity demanded shifts with price. Demand does not. Demand has to have something from the outside affect the actual demand curve. Now that said, there is an exception. And the exception is when we come to behavioral finance, where people judge the quality of an item based off of the price. For instance, if there's two products that are very similar, you will perceive the higher priced one to be better, even if in fact it may not be the case. But generally speaking, the rule is that we have price will shift along a demand curve, other things will shift demand curves. What have we learned here? We've learned that demand curves equate price and quantity demanded, and along that line, along the demand curve line, if price changes, quantity changes. And the higher the price, the lower the quantity. Makes perfect sense. Things that shift demands from D1 to D2, for instance, are not, price is generally not in that category. That would be breakthroughs or advertising or new innovations, things that change the actual amount that people want at any given price. And that's a key point. So if we have a price here, whatever this is, P star, and at P star we have this quantity demanded under the first demand curve, and then we go out and we have this much in the second demand, clearly the price has stayed the same. So it's not price that is changing the quantity demanded, it is an actual change in demand. So that's pretty much what we have for demand curves. The next one we'll do is supply curves. The next thing we're going to do is talk about revenue. Revenue, or in this case total revenue, is going to equal price times quantity. And we'll do an easy example here. Let's suppose the price is high. We will say 10. And at 10, we only sell 2 items. So this area, 2 times 20, 2 times 10 equals 20. So we have 20 here. This is 20. This is the total revenue here. Now let's suppose you decide, okay, we know the demand curve, and let's do some market research. Suppose we can change the price, and we change the price to 5. At 5, and I'm going to try to change the color here as well if I can. At 5, we can sell 5. So at price 5, we sell quantity 5. So 5 times 5, total revenue here in this area is 25. So everything being equal, a company would rather sell at 5 rather than 10 because their revenue would be 25 rather than 20. So let's sum up. What have we learned? We've learned that demand curves relate price and quantity, and that at higher prices we sell fewer items than at lower prices, which makes sense. We also have learned that total revenue equals price times quantity, and it is represented by the area in that square. So next thing we'll do is go on to a video on supply.